everyone, and welcome to Everyday Guardians, a podcast series from the Better Satellite World, brought to you by Space and Satellite Professionals International. I'm Tamara Bond-Williams, Executive Director of SSPI. Everyday Guardians is where we meet the people who are protecting our shared future in space. Not with slogans, but with systems, and not just through ideas, but through action. Today's episode, Great Expectations, Space Stewardship in an Age of Power and Partnership, features our guest, Nobu Okada, founder and CEO of Astroscale. From a one-person startup to a multinational pioneer in space sustainability, Astroscale is shaping the way we think about debris removal, servicing in orbit, and how to build trust in the infrastructure of space. In this episode, we explore what it means to serve both global good and national priorities, and how expectations can evolve as your mission becomes indispensable. The Better Satellite World podcast is supported by SSPI's corporate partners, Access Intelligence, publishers of Via Satellite Magazine, delivering trusted news and insight to the space and satellite industry for over 40 years. Clyde and Company, providing expert legal counsel across the global aerospace and space sectors. Hughes and EchoStar Company, who are building a more connected world through advanced satellite technologies and global networking solutions, and the American Space Exploration Trust Fund, dedicated to advancing space safety and proud underwriter of our Securing the Future of Space series. SSPI also thanks its members whose support make this podcast possible. And with that, I'm so happy to welcome Nobu Okada to our podcast. Nobu, welcome.
Thank you, Tamara, and thank you for having me here today.
Absolutely. I'm very, very grateful that you're here. I'm actually really honored. We have been following Astroscale from success to success. And so it's quite the honor to be able to have you, the CEO himself, here on the SSPI podcast.
So, thank you for pouring us. It's still on the way, long way to go.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about it. Let's start right there, right? So you founded Astroscale more than a decade ago, and you had a vision. I think most people kind of saw it as science fiction, right? What was your personal turning point that convinced you that this was a problem that you had to tackle?
Thank you. Before Astroscale, my entire career had nothing to do with space. But 12 years ago, I was searching for something that could reignite the passion of my youth, which was space. And I started attending a few space conferences, and not only to reconnect with that early fascination, but also to see what the hot topics were. And after attending those conferences, three things became clear. Number one, space debris had already made the space environment unsustainable. And then number two, no one had a solution for the problem. And thirdly, this was a challenge I needed to dedicate myself to. And a week later, I founded Astroscale.
Wow. That's quite an origin story. So thank you so much for sharing it. What I heard in that, what I heard in that was just, first of all, that you are an entrepreneur at heart, right? That you saw a problem and you set about solving it. And so I want to applaud you for that because that's courageous, enterprising, and exciting.
So it's not that great. So it's not so great story, by the way. It's, before turning to 40-year-old, I was in a midlife crisis, and I was looking for something I can devote myself my life. And I was looking for something farther challenges, with the steep growth. And I found this space debris issue. And this is one of the most complex and urgent problems facing humanity. And when I found this issue, I felt like, oh, this is my end of midlife crisis. So I should say I was lucky.
Yeah, that's I contrary to what you just said, and apologize for contradicting you, but I actually think that makes it even more impressive because people can go lots of different ways with midlife crises. Um, okay, well, you recently contributed an article to the Orbiter. And in that issue, you said that Astroscale is not simply exporting a vision, but is co creating solutions region by region. And so I guess an example of that might be your recent partnerships in India, where you're collaborating with a couple of countries. I think Digantara, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, and Bellatrix Aerospace. So, how does this co creation manifest in emerging space markets such as India? And what unique challenges or opportunities have arisen there?
Mm, yeah, that's the most important stuff. Thank you for asking me. So, space sustainability is one of the most complex global challenges. So, it sits at the intersection of technology, policy, and economics. And we cannot solve it in one country. We have to build incrementally, leveraging local capabilities while scaling globally. So in practice, this means building missions in each country we are located in, and taking into account export control and national priorities while ensuring shared learning. So now
Mm-hmm.
we have offices in 5 countries, and at each office have engineers, clean room to meet regional demand. So, and we lean on collaboration with allied nations because when we solve for sovereign needs in a way that supports the broader system, we all benefit from strong economy to a sustainable and resilient future in space. That's the answer. And co-creation means, space is global, but it's still regional. So we have to have, solve in each country, and you know, and then leverage these capabilities and scale globally. But we should
Yeah.
keep it in mind about export control and national priorities.
Yeah. You know, I'll ask the question first, and then I'll kind of back into what the thought is triggering for me. So, as you say, you have to solve for regional problems in order to have a global impact. And certainly we know that space companies are, generally speaking, largely reliant in part or almost entirely on the support of governments. Um, but I asked the question about how you protect the vision that you set forth of solving this really big, really complex global problem when you're responding to national interest. And why this is thought is coming up for me is that, over the last several years, in different places around the world, the rise of nationalistic thinking, as
Mm,
opposed to globalized thinking, has been on the ascendant, right? So countries are really thinking about what's best for my country to the exclusion of other countries. And yet your vision is very global. So how do you protect your vision in that climate?
right. That's true. The Over the last 12 months, all the countries we are working with had general elections, and we see the big shift in geopolitics. And then now each country, are more focusing on enhancing their sovereign uh, kind of capabilities. So that's correct.
Mm-hmm.
But we see government not as a constraint, but as a catalyst. So let me explain this. So once on one side, governments are acknowledging the importance of the orbital environment. And for example, the last year, all UN member states, over 190 countries, agreed to establish a new framework for debris and space traffic management. So on
Mm-hmm.
the other side, commercial customers are increasingly interested in our on-orbit servicing solutions. So just like in other deep tech sectors, the pathway from government-backed R&D to commercial adoption is well established. So the internet, GPS, AI, drones, on all of these transition from government or defense to widespread commercial use. So as long as we stay grounded in our mission, that vision remains intact. So yeah, that's all. That's how I see the current the circumstances.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate that. And I appreciate that you're thinking about it because it is a very challenging, like you say, geopolitical shift that is underway, and I'm very curious to know how do we rise to meet this challenge because I am of the opinion that space is our shared responsibility.
Correct.
And I don't see how we succeed unless we treat it that way. So I'm grateful that you were out there championing that even at the regional level. So we're talking about success. Let's flip that, right? How do you define failure in this field? Not just in terms of mission outcomes, but also in terms of the responsibilities to the broader ecosystem. And then having defined it, how do you avoid it?
Mm. There are so many failures day by day, but for me, the failure is when we do not uphold our responsibility to the broader space ecosystem,
Mhm.
right? So the the consequences of space debris are not always immediate or visible, but
Mhm.
they add up over the time. We ignore the reality. If we do not take any actions, future generations have to pay more, right? So avoiding that kind of failure requires something deeper than technical success. And so it means staying committed to sustainability, even when it's hard to measure, hard to justify, or hard to prioritize in a competitive market. So it means building a culture where success is defined not just by what we achieve today, but by what we enable for tomorrow. So that's what long-term responsibility looks like.
You are listening to The Better Satellite World, the longest running continuous podcast in the commercial space and satellite industry. The Better Satellite World podcast is funded by the corporate partners of SSPI, Hughes, Access Intelligence, and the American Space Exploration Fund. This podcast is also supported by live event partner Hogan Lovells. Have you heard about SBQ? Space Business Qualified is a popular online learning program for industry professionals designed by JSOA, SSPI, and SatProf. To learn more, visit spacebq.org. And in August and November, join Tamara, Space News Magazine, and the New York Space Alliance for the next New York Space Business Roundtable. If you want to get inside the industry's biggest issues and investments, Meet startups and high-profile industry leaders from around the world. The Roundtable is the real New York event you cannot miss. If you like this podcast and are hearing it for the first time, a new podcast drops every Monday. To listen to previously released episodes, visit sspI.org/podcast or wherever you get your podcasts. And now back to the better satellite world.
I mean, I agree, and I wonder if there's a way. Well, I hope there's a way. I hope there's a way that we can make the consequence of failure more visible. I mean, that's almost entirely the point of this series that we're doing right now, the Securing the Future of Space series, is to make it possible and visible and increase awareness of the consequences of not taking seriously our responsible to the orbital environment. And of course, the Kessler syndrome is a big bad word to those who know what the word actually means, right? But we not a lot of people do. I guess I'll ask two questions. From your standpoint, are you talking to people actively, like educating people, or is Astroscale actively educating people about the Kessler syndrome and the consequences thereof? Or do you try to keep it a little lighter so that people have a different kind of understanding of the value of the work that you do?
We are always, thank you for the questions. From day one of Astroscale, we've been telling stakeholders about the facts and what's happening in space. And then governments or investors or partners, customers had no idea about the threat in space. So, for example, for example, today, there are over 10,000 active satellites are traveling around the Earth.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, more than 40,000 large object debris are traveling. So more than 80% of the objects in space are debris. And then talking about near misses between satellites and debris, in low Earth orbit, it was, up to 2020, the number of near misses within 1 kilometer was around 2,000 times per day. No, per month, which is 66 times per day. And it increased in threefold in 2021. So 200 times per day, which is horrible, right? And then, so now today, the satellites are moving out of the way of debris by burning expensive fuel and then almost every 5 minutes. And so in space, risk is increasing, return is decreasing, and we have to flip this. We should reduce the risk and increase return. And the question, how? And then, let me explain a bit more about what's happening in space. So later last year, almost every month from June to December, we saw big breakups of the debris. No, the satellites or debris. So generating thousands of large trackable debris with numerous number of untrackable debris. So trackable debris, we can, check the near misses and we can avoid collision by, moving out of the way. However, for untrackable debris, we cannot do anything for that, right? So clock is ticking, and we have to. We should not increase debris more, and we should reduce the existing debris too. So that this kind of stuff I'm talking every day.
Yeah. You took the question right out of my mouth. I was just about to ask about very small debris, right? Because the threat of large objects colliding is an obvious threat, but at the speed of space, a small object is deadly, right? And can cause
Right.
so many big problems, and and so what are we doing about that? And I think another question that just popped into my head, it's not necessarily in your wheelhouse, but I was reading somewhere that someone was making micro set or yeah, I think that was the language they used, micro or nano satellites. So these were
Mm,
even smaller satellites than small sats.
mm,
And and at first I was like, okay, that's cool. And then on the second thought, I said, why would you do that? It just seemed so dangerous and precarious. And it seemed cool because it makes space so much more accessible to so many more people. I think this was a children's application. You can send up microsatellites to do single experiments on very tiny devices. But when I think about just so many things flying around that are really tiny, I get nervous. That seems really
mm.
scary to me. Am I crazy about that, or is that reasonable?
Yeah, that's a great questions. And so you're right. Those we call them CubeSat. They do not have enough maneuverability. They even cannot, avoid collisions. So, however, the good news is these satellites are usually deployed in very low Earth orbit, which is around 400 kilometers altitude to 450 kilometers altitude. So if they go defunct, they can naturally come down to the atmosphere within a year and then
Mm-hmm.
burn by themselves. But
Yeah.
for the typical large or small satellites enter into 550 kilometers or 650 or 800 kilometers or 1200 kilometers, these remain, decades or centuries. So that's a problem.
Wow. Okay. Just what a world we live in. Things are changing so rapidly, and it's such a good thing. It's such a net benefit to the world that Astroscale comes on the scene when you do, so that we have these ideas and these thoughts and these concerns up front, even at the building stage of a satellite, that we're thinking about what is the impact of this satellite? Where is it going to be in orbit, and how do we get it back out of orbit safely? That we start talking about that, because we already are there, where it's like you said. I mean, we're already at mission critical phase. Um, let me ask another question for you. So, when you take on a military contract, like you just now, the U.S. Space Force just signed a big contract with the U.S. Office of Astroscale. So, when you take on a military contract, what are the questions that you ask internally to make sure that you're staying on track to your original purpose? And and how does the government customer work with you, or how much pushback do you find that you get from government customers, especially military customers?
Oh yeah. The that's a good question again. So once again, Astroscale was founded with a clear mission to ensure the long-term sustainability of space, and this mission remains unchanged. And yes, you're right. We are seeing a major shift in the global space landscape, and today it's clear that space security and space sustainability are no longer separate conversations. So
Very good.
now geopolitical tensions are driving nations to recognize the importance of space domain and turn inward and invest heavily in building domestic space capabilities to protect national interests. So as you mentioned, that's true. And on-orbit servicing, or OOS, lies at the heart of this shift. So capabilities like inspection, defueling, deorbiting, and eventually repairing and recycling are now recognized as critical to maintaining secure and sustainable space infrastructure, what defense have. So that's why we are very happy to support their logistics, and then these surging demand from defense sides will accelerate to get to our mission. So that's our understanding, and then we talked a lot with the team, and then they also see this. We are quite aligned among the team.
Very, very good. Okay, so here's my last question to you. The series is called Everyday Guardians. And so I will ask, what does being a guardian of space mean to you today? And how has that definition evolved from the day you set forth to solve this very big problem?
I get so many questions, but this is the first time to get that question. So, what does being the guardian of space means to me today, right? So, the being the guardian of space means building the infrastructure needed to make long-term orbital sustainability possible. And at Astroscale, we see on-orbit servicing as that foundational infrastructure, like road service assistant for the highways of space. So today's space operations are still mostly single-use throwaway culture, right? Satellites are not built to be repaired, refueled, or responsibly retired. So that throwaway culture might have worked in the past, but it is no longer viable. So our role is to change that by developing satellite servicing technologies that make reuse and responsibility part of the norm. So sustainability starts with infrastructure, and that's what we are building.
Thank you so much. Okay, I have to ask one more question because I just saw this. Airbus just placed a very large scale commercial order for your docking plates. And I is that, first of all, I take it that that's part of this infrastructure that you're talking about, that we start thinking about how what we build is built to be, sustainable. It's built to be able to be serviced in space, that it's not one and done and discardable. But are you seeing that right now as being a pickup in commercial vision of the importance of space sustainability?
Yeah. So thank you for mentioning that. So we are selling docking plate. It's a very light, small plate, and then we are asking the satellite operators to pre-mount docking plate onto the satellites. So that once their satellite go defunct or something wrong happens in space, our servicing satellites can easily approach and capture with magnet. And then we can remove or defuel, or we can do whatever service. So currently, around 570 satellites up there already have kind of a docking plate, which is compatible with our servicing satellite. And as you mentioned, Airbus recently purchased more than 100 docking plates. And then we are talking with more companies right now. So they are taking notice. They have to remain space sustainable because they have to do the business. They have to reduce risk and increase return. So they are, really kind of understanding the needs of the ability to be served in future. So you're right. The commercial companies are picking up.
Yeah. Well, it is a very hopeful turn of events, and it's very hopeful and wonderful transition from a midlife crisis. So, Nobu, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We really enjoyed the conversation with you today. Thank you.
Thank you. And that brings our conversation with Nobu Okada to a close. We thank him for his insight and for the work he and his team are doing to make space safe, sustainable, and accessible for generations to come. Don't forget to subscribe to the SSPI podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, or wherever you listen. Here's something new. SSPI podcasts are on YouTube now. Visit SSPI video, all one word, on YouTube and look for our podcast playlist. You can find SSPI on Twitter at SSPI and on LinkedIn and Facebook. For Space and Satellite Professionals International and our producer Ari Yates, I'm Tamara Bond Williams. Thanks for listening, and thank you for making a better satellite world.